So we're going to continue using Captain Chords to find an alternate chord progression for a different section of the vocal. So this is our first progression that we had. So I want it to change there. So we're going to cycle this section and we're going to move to the pre-chorus to add in a new chord progression. And we're going to approach this in some different ways to show you different ways you can interact with this plugin. So first of all, in the first chord progression, we actually just chose chords from the list here and added in chords. But this time we're going to use some preset progressions. Now, what's great about this feature is we can click on the progression to audition it. So both by clicking on the progression itself, and even more usefully within the track. I think that kind of works, but let's have a look at some other options. Maybe something a little bit simpler. Yeah, I think that works. It's just two chords, A minor and G major. But I think that simplicity works quite well. Okay, so the next thing we could try doing with this is changing up the time feel. So the moment it's changing on one measure, but we can experiment with some different segments to the chords. Now this is a little bit more of a kind of experimentation tool, I'd say, and can be a little bit random, but let's try out some options here. That kind of works, but I think I'm just going to go back to one measure and keep things simple. But what I'm going to try is using some preset rhythms from here. Okay, I'm going to stick with this Dreams option here. Okay, so that's one way that we could work with Captain Chords. Choose a progression, experiment with timings if we want to, and choose a rhythm from here. Dead simple, and you can see we can get great results. Now, of course, from here, we could go through and amend some of our chords to make things a little bit more interesting. We could also split things and try creating some passing chords, like so. So let's make this one a different variation. And we can experiment with different inversions and complexities as we did before. So that's one way we could create a chord progression. Okay, so let's flick across to the next slot here, chorus, and let's try a different way of adding in a progression. So we'll click on play, and we have the MIDI keyboard, but even simpler, we have the computer keyboard. Now I'm going to demo this on the computer keyboard because let's imagine you're on a laptop, you don't have a MIDI keyboard available to you at that time. This shouldn't stop you being able to jam out great ideas with Captain Chords because you can use the computer keyboard. And this has been enhanced in Captain Chords 5. We've got extra chords that we can work with. Okay, so within Captain Play, what we have is the ability with the computer keyboard to play different progressions. So we could play progressions in root position. So this is the kind of default position for the chord with the tonic of the chord, the root of the chord lowest. That's A to J. First inversion is going to move that root position so that the root is at the top. And this information is just, if you're interested, it really is not essential information. What you can do, and that's the beauty of Captain Chords, is just use your ear to work out what sounds good. Second inversion takes a third of the chord and moves it to the top, and that's from Z to M. Now by holding down Shift, we can actually add in seventh chords from Q to U, and then pretty alternatives of the chord from Z to M. And remember, we have these borrowed chords at the top from 1 to 7, which allows us to play with chords which are outside the key, but will also sound good. Okay, so let's try jamming something out. I'm going to stick with root position to keep things nice and simple. Okay, I like the sound of that. Now you may have noticed down here that this region has been generated as I was playing there. Now there's different things we can do with this. First of all, we could drag and drop it into our arrangement, and we could go through and amend this as we would do normally in the piano roll. So that's one way we could work with this progression, and we could move things around and do the things we would normally do in our DAWs. Alternatively, what we could do, we could click Edit and add it into our chorus section, and we now have that chord progression added in as a variation. So now we could try out the pre-chorus we generated using a default progression. And then we can flip to our jammed chord progression from play. And of course, once we're in here, we can go through and change things up using some of our controls here. Like so. We could play with some alternate chords as well. Okay, Not sure that chord's quite working there. Let's put that back to the standard C major. Okay, it's working well. So let's click on the drop section and try out a different idea. Okay, now something we could try here is actually using our MIDI keyboard to jam out an idea, and then we can add these chords into Captain Chords. Because the benefit of doing this is obviously later down the line we're going to be using Captain Melody and Captain Deep to generate bass lines and melody ideas. So we need to have the chord progression in Captain Chords. So I could come up with something myself, add it into Captain Chords, and then be able to access the other modules to create the musical ideas. So if I click MIDI in, now we have Captain Chords acting as a sound module. Okay, so I'm going to try out a chord progression. I do have something in mind on the MIDI keyboard, so here we go. Yeah, so I like that. So what I'm going to do, click on this drop section, and the chords were B-7. So I'll click in custom and I'll write in B-7, set chord. There we go. So we did that twice. So we'll put that in again. There we go. Then it was C major 7, and you can see I can use Logic's transport control to tell me what the chord is. So let's add in a new chord, C major 7, and then the final chord was D major. So I'll add in again. Now we don't have D major here because it's not part of A minor, but if we click on D, we have D major there. So let's have a listen to how that sounds. Yeah, so I like that. Okay, so now we have 3 new chord progressions we can try out for the track. A pre-chorus generated using a preset progression. Captain Play has enabled me to come up with an alternate progression. And finally, using my own keyboard playing and just writing the chords in using Logic's transport to tell me what I was playing if I wasn't sure, I've been able to input a progression as well. So in the next video, what we're going to do is actually just decide which one we're going to use, and I'm also going to try out recording in a rhythm idea for this progression here. So to recap, in this video, we started off by adding in a new alternate progression using the pre-chorus slot here. We chose a progression from here. Remember, you can audition progressions actually within the track and also just by single clicking on them. We tried out a timing idea, but stuck with one measure in the end. And we tried out some different rhythms, sticking with this Dreams option here. We then kind of changed up some of the chords just to make it a bit more interesting. And then we used Captain Play in the computer keyboard mode to come up with a chord progression using the root position. And remember, we can use borrowed chords using the numbers. You see actually that D major appears in borrowed chords. First inversion chords using Q to U, second inversion from Z to M, and then root position obviously was A to J. And by holding down Shift, remember, we can choose pretty alternatives. 6 chords, etc. We can also use sevenths from Q to U now. So we have some different options by holding down Shift. And then for this drop section, remember, I played in a chord progression, kind of worked out what I was playing, wrote it into the custom slot for each chord, and that enabled me to create a custom progression that way. Okay, so as I said, the next video we're going to kind of reassess what we've got here, choose one to focus on, and I'm also going to try out recording a rhythm idea